Hi guys, I'm Anita and I'm back with another video. Today I'm here to give you my January wrap up with all of the books that I read in January. I ended up reading a total of 13 books, which I haven't been up to that number since I believe July last year. Since then I've probably been reading like between 5 and maybe 9 books. So this was a good start to the year, I believe. I ended up reading a total of 4,310 pages. 5 of these books were audio, so that took up a lot of the time. Then I had 1 library book, which was also a graphic novel. And then I had 5 books from my own bookshelf, and then I had 1 Kindle book and 1 e-arc. By the end of this video, I'll be checking in on the goals that I set for myself for the year, how I did with that in this month. And the first book that I finished in January was Full Metal Alchemist by Hiromu Arakawa. I'm totally butchering his name, I'm sorry about that. Anyway, this series follows these 2 boys. They're alchemists, they're brothers, and when they were pretty little they sadly lost their mother. She passed away, and they decided, because of their alchemy knowledge, that they would try to get her mother back from the dead. And something went wrong, and it ended up with the main character losing his arm and his leg, and the other became completely invisible, so he lost his own whole body. So his soul is sort of captured in this suit of armor thing. They're now working for sort of a secret agency that helps out if there are any of the alchemists sort of trying to cheat things and sort of doing horrible things. They're sort of trying to save the world with that. I'm really enjoying these books. I won't say too much about the plot because I don't want to spoil anything about this series, how it's going right now, but they're really fast paced and there's a lot of things going on, and it's kind of fun guessing along with the characters. I ended up giving this book a 4 out of 5 stars because I still really enjoy this, and I'm definitely going to check out the next volumes from the library as well. I'm not sure how many of the volumes they have, but I know they have quite a lot of them. And the book that I completed after that was The Bookshop on the Corner by Jenny Colgan. This is a chick lit book set in England and Scotland. This follows this girl who has lost her job. She's sort of a book collector. She can't really stop buying books, which I can totally understand because it's difficult. We all love buying books. This went so overboard that her friend decided that she had to do something about it. If she didn't get a job, she's gonna have to sell them some way. She's gonna get rid of them in some way. And then when she's at these job camps, sort of trying to figure things out, there's someone talking about people driving around in vans and selling stuff, and so she decides to start her own little bookshop in a van. So she'll go to those very small towns where they don't have access to libraries or bookstores at all. And when she's in the hunt for this van, she goes to Scotland to pick this up, and things sort of start out there, and she finds that people up there really wants to be able to buy these books from her bookstore. So she basically sort of ends up staying for the majority of this book in Scotland, in a very small town, and sort of getting to knowing all of these people. This usually is just right up my alley, and this was also pretty cute, but I felt like it lacked something. It wasn't really what I was expecting it to be honest. Yeah, there's just something about this that didn't click completely with me, but I did enjoy it overall, and I ended up giving it a 3 out of 5 stars. And the next book that I finished was Magic Study by Marie V. Snyder, the second book to this Study trilogy. This is a series that follows Yelena, who has been a prisoner and is basically sentenced to death. So there's not really any way out, except that this man comes down and gives her an option. She can be the commander's poison taster or the king and queen of this realm. And so she decides to obviously to take up this job, even though it's pretty dangerous because she has to taste everything and she has to find out if there's poison in it. If anyone wants to poison the king, she also has to know which antidotes to take for each and every poison there is. So there's a lot of studying to do, and it's kind of a brutal job. And then she also discovers that she has some sort of magic, and it's very, very forbidden in this part of the country that they live in, that they're not allowed to use magic at all. It's very, very looked down upon, and if they notice that she's incapable of doing magic, they'll also be killing her for that. That's execution right then and there. I so loved how everything worked out in the first book, and I love where this is going now. I can't say much of the plot of this book because it will spoil everything that happened in the first book. But I'm so shipping the ship in this, and yeah, I absolutely love this book so much. And if you have not yet checked out Marie V. Snyder before, I highly suggest you check it out if you like YA fantasy. They're really great books, and they definitely keep you wanting to read the next page and then the next page and then the next page. And I don't know how I could have taken so long to get back into this series, but I thoroughly loved this book and I gave it a 5 out of 5 stars. It was just as good as the first book in the series, in my opinion. The next book that I finished for this month was Changes by Jim Butcher, the 12th book in the Harry Dresden series. As you know, if you've been following my channel for a while, you must know that I love this series so much, and yeah, so I've been reading it for a while. This series follows Harry, who is a wizard, and he sort of started his own agency where he's sort of investigating into this paranormal occult stuff, and he's often teaming up with the Chicago Police Department, where they have a certain Karen Murphy who is basically in charge of that area. I thought that nothing could be better than book 8 in the series, but this book is the best book in the series that I've read so far. Everything that happened, I was completely it was an emotional role in so many ways, and we were, yeah, there was just so many things happening that I did not expect to be happening in this book, and I can't wait to find out what's going to happen in the next book, because the ending of this book was crazy. So I'm definitely going to be reading the next book next month as well, because I love this series so much, and I only have 3 books left of the books that are out currently, so close to being caught up with this series, and I just love this series so much, and the side characters and all of it. So, and definitely I also love the narrator. I've said this countless of times, James Masters is my favorite narrator for audios, and I've also heard that he's changed a lot since the beginning. I didn't listen to the audios until book 5, so I don't know how he did in the first 4 books, but I've heard that the first is especially that he was a little stuttering and sort of fumbling his way through that book. But this was also the first book that he ever narrated, so I believe that he's come across that hurdle and has become one of the best there is. After finishing that book, I also finished another audio which was called Scarlett by A.C. Gowan. Also, I think she's called. And this is basically a retelling of Robin Hood. This follows Scarlett, who is one of Robin Hood's thieves. She is hiding herself among Robin Hood's gang and hiding herself as a boy. Everyone thinks he's a boy. Somehow they all figure out that she's a girl, and things sort of change in their dynamics towards her. And then there's suddenly this sort of love triangle going on, and I actually didn't mind this love triangle too bad. Sometimes I hate love triangles because I think they're just there for no apparent reason. But I enjoyed this book pretty much. I definitely think it was an interesting take on the Robin Hood story. Not at all how I expected it to go. This had a pretty interesting plot. And I ended up giving this 3.5 out of 5 stars, but I have a feeling that the next books in the trilogy will be actually a lot better. So I definitely want to check them out in the next coming months as well. because I really think they were interesting. Now I'm going to be moving into the books that I read for the readathons, and before I get into this, I'm just only going to be briefly talking about these because I've already done reviews of these in my wrap-ups for the readathons, and I'd rather spend this video focusing on the other books that I also read. So I'm gonna briefly mention these and give you my rating, and then if you want to know my reasons for these thoughts, then I will leave a link. You can go check out my 24 in 48 hours readathon here. I'll leave it in a card symbol here, and I'll also leave a link to it in the down bar below if you want to check it out. The first book that I finished for the 24 in 48 readathon was Say You Will by Kate Perry, the first book to the Summerhill series. This was a bit of a meh read for me. I gave it a 3 out of 5 stars. So it was okay, but it wasn't anything amazing. The second book that I finished for the 24 in 48 was Truth Witch by Susan Dennett, the first book to her Truth Witch series. I really enjoyed this book after I got into it. It had a little bit of a slow start, and because they were so cramped with all of these info about the world building, and that was a little hard to get through, but I overall loved this book so much and ended up giving it a 4 out of 5 stars. The next book I finished for the 24 in 48 was Nemona by Noelle Stevenson. This is a graphic novel, and I gave this graphic novel a 5 out of 5 stars. The best graphic novel I've read. And finally, I also finished The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern, and I ended up really enjoying this one, and I ended up giving it a 4 out of 5 stars. The next book I finished was actually not part of any of the readathons, but it is one that I read sort of as I was reading for these readathons, and that is The Star Unchained by Larissa Ioni. This is the second book to the Demonica series. This is a paranormal romance book, and it follows, and the norm of paranormal romance is sort of that they change couples with every book. So in this book we follow Shade and Runa. Shade is an incubus who has been dealt this horrible curse, and then we have Runa, who is a werewolf shapeshifter, and one day they find themselves in this captivity, and they have both of them don't really know where they are and how they got there. Runa and Shade has sort of known each other in the past and didn't really leave things in good terms, but since they're trapped, and Runa going through her changing phase, which is a time where she has a more difficult time to sort of control her desires. And Shade, being an incubus, he has to fulfill her wish, no matter if he wants to or not. He can't really get out of it. And so they end up having sex, and then they accidentally bond. So this sort of sends the story into motion, if you will. And Shade, he has to sort of dig into Runa's past and shape-shifting history, because there's some things that don't really add up towards her. And then they're also both being hunted by one of Shade's brothers that they all believe to be dead, who's out for some sort of vengeance towards them both. Overall, I enjoyed the book, and I like Larissa Ioni's writing. I think that she is good at making these paranormal romances to be about other things than just sex and lust and romance. And I think that's interesting that she actually put a little more depth to it. There's more to it than just that, which often happen in paranormal romances. I did overall like Shade and Runa's characters separately, but I didn't really feel the romance very much. But I'm definitely interested in reading onwards in this series, because I've heard that this is the best series that Larissa Ioni wrote, and I've also read her other series, which only have 2 books, and I enjoyed that. So hopefully I'm in for some great books as well in the future, and I ended up giving this particular book 4 out of 5 stars. For the Diversathon, I ended up finishing Simon vs. the Homo Sapiens Agenda. This is a book that I thoroughly loved. Every aspect of this story was just really well written and well structured, and I loved everything about it. I gave it a 5 out of 5 stars. Finally, I also read Bad Boy by Elliot Wake, who is formerly known as Leah Radar. This is a book about transgender sexuality, and I gave this book a 4 out of 5 stars. The final book that I read in January, that's an e-arc that I got called Lea Loves Areas by Anita Sunday. We follow Theo, who has a twin called Leonie as well. Leonie is actually blind, so that adds another diversity to it. But this is a male-male romance. This starts with these two twins. They are looking for a roommate, and they are also sort of trying to find each other a date for their exes' weddings, because their exes apparently got together. Since Theo finds out that his old tutor from economics class, who's called Jamie, is looking for an apartment to sublet, he asked him to come over and see the apartment and if he wanted to be their roommate, and how he sort of acted towards Leonie. Through all of this book, Theo is sort of trying to figure Jamie out, how he's going to be working as his sister's boyfriend, because he's definitely trying to hook them up, but he wanted to do some sort of background check on him before that. And I absolutely loved this book, because this is obviously a book about how he finds out that he's actually gay, or that he likes boys. He didn't know that there was something wrong when he was dating the girls. There was not something missing from their relationships. So he sort of just builds up this really close friendship with Jamie, and every time there's something that he doesn't really understand about their relationship, their friendship and stuff, he just sort of says, this is just because this is Jamie and that's how he is and all of that. And I just really enjoyed that, and yeah, I really loved this. Ended up enjoying this book. I thought Theo and Jamie were super awesome characters to follow. This is, however, an adult contemporary romance, so there's quite some adult content that you should be aware of. So if sex scenes and stuff is something that will trigger you, then you shouldn't be picking this book up. But otherwise, I'll suggest checking this book out, because it's very cute and sweet and gives a lot of messages out, and it has a lot of great characters in this book. I both enjoyed Theo and Jamie's stories, but I also really like Leonie and her ship, which happens during the book as well. And then there's also another gay couple in this, and I like the way that the author handled the diversity in this book. So I ended up giving this book a 4 out of 5 stars. It wasn't like perfect or anything, but it's definitely not the last time I'll be checking out a book by this author. So this concludes all of the books that I finished in January. Let me know in the comments down below which books you read in January and what did you think of them. Have you read any of the books that I have been reading for January? I'd really like to know that as well. And if you have any questions about any of the books that I didn't cover in this video, then please leave them down below and I'll try to answer it as best as possible. And yeah, just before I stop for today, because I promised I would check in with my goals, and one of the goals was the TBR pick from my TBR jar. That was Truth which I obviously completed. And then we have the old Kindle book, which is Say You Will, which was like at the bottom of my Kindle. So this is the oldest one that I had on there, and I obviously read that, so another checkpoint. And then we have Scarlett, which was added to my TBR back in 2013, early 2013. So it's definitely also working for this old TBR challenge that I did. Anyway, this is all I had for you today. If you liked the video, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and I'll see you in my next video, probably tomorrow, so because I'll be back with another TBR. Bye!